Welcome to the 4th Annual Iowa Ideas Conference. I'm Jennifer Daly, President and CEO of ICR Iowa, our region's economic development organization and the proud host of Inclusive ICR. Inclusive ICR is a coalition of over 114 members representing 57 employers from throughout the Iowa City, Cedar Rapids region. Our goal is to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in our regional workforce. We are so excited to be hosting and sponsoring 11 sessions during this year's Iowa Ideas Conference. We hope you enjoy the conversations, make new connections, and walk away with some really big ideas.
I'm Erin Jordan. I'm the Gazette's investigative reporter, and I have the pleasure of moderating several different discussions within the energy and environment track. So this may be the last session of the day, but I think they wanted to save a good one till the end of the day. I'm really excited about this panel for two reasons. One, it's such an important topic, and one that we all need to think about as we're moving forward with recovery from the derecho and just with all the issues in our state. And two, we have a great lineup of panelists from across the state. I'll have each of them introduce themselves in a moment. And what I'd ask them to do is just briefly introduce themselves and tell our audience how each of them connect to the topic of energy and at-risk populations. Should we start with Shalla?
Great, thanks, Erin. My name is Shalla Ashworth. I am the Director of Development and Communications at the Salvation Army here in Cedar Rapids. We work with the population is mostly either homeless or low income, single families, elderly who are struggling. And one of the programs that we have is a rent and utility assistance program. And that is geared towards folks who are having trouble paying either their rent or their utilities. We see honestly more utilities than I think we see rent. It is an assistance. So folks come to us, they've already gotten assistance maybe from another organization, but they need to have some more assistance, and we fill in some of those holes. We are not a crutch for you to pay every month. We do have, obviously, we only help you once every 12 months. So we're hoping that you can get back on your feet with our assistance. But we then work with you in other programs that we have. We have a couple different food programs, and we then have a Pathway of Hope program where we sit down with families who are struggling and who don't maybe understand completely how to budget, how to make sure that you can pay the utility bills or pay the rent or get your groceries. And we walk them through a process to teach them some of these tactics so that they can make a better existence for their family and hopefully not get into that situation again.
Go ahead, whoever would like to go next.
You can go. Hi everyone, my name is Ashley Kraft. I'm the program director of Green Iowa AmeriCorps, which is an AmeriCorps state program that is operating out of the University of Northern Iowa's Center for Energy and Environmental Education. We've been operational for about 10 years, and our program brings in AmeriCorps members to help us facilitate environmental stewardship and energy efficiency service work to Iowans. And a large majority of our program is focused on residential energy efficiency work, predominantly for vulnerable populations in our state. So looking at low-income households, individuals who are 65 years of age and older, persons with disabilities, and veterans, really looking at our community's most vulnerable populations and trying to target our services in that way. Our program is also expanding to focus on rural communities where we're seeing a lot less availability of services. And so one large component of our program is focused again on residential energy efficiency work, and it's really about providing free energy assessments and follow-up retrofit and weatherization work. So we have teams of members who go in and are trained, getting a lot of professional development experience. And then we get into around 600 to 700 homes a year, providing completely free energy assessments, safety checks, and then follow-up weatherization, where we go in and we do air sealing. We give them energy efficiency improvements like LED lights, low flow water aerators, with the same idea that we're trying to lessen the burden that so many households feel from their utility bills. And the hope is that by providing this service, we can go in and kind of get to the root of the issue so that we see those utility bills go down, so they're less reliant on other financial assistance, and that we can have some of those long-term impacts in the spaces that they're living, so that they can reallocate those funds to food or rent or other kind of basic necessities. So.
Chris, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. My name is Christine Taylor, and I work with the state of Iowa and manage the low-income home energy assistance program, otherwise known as LiHEAP. So it's a block grant that is federally funded through or by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and it's administered through us at the Iowa Department of Human Rights. We're located in Des Moines. We're in the Division of Community Action Agencies. And then we contract with community action agencies throughout Iowa for local program delivery. The program is designed to help households living in poverty with a one-time payment on their heating bill, which is made directly to the energy supplier. And the energy supplier could be natural gas or electric, propane, wood, coal, even corn. So we send that payment, whatever the benefit award is, the average is $460. We send that directly to the utility company. Last year, we had over 82,000 households that were approved for this program. And, like the other programs, what we're trying to do is help lower their energy burden. And, it's a one-time payment, and people who live in who are living in poverty typically do not live in energy efficient homes. And so their energy bills are much higher than the average person's. So the program began October 1st for households that have a member who is elderly or disabled, or if they're facing imminent disconnection. And then it'll begin November 1st for everyone else, and it goes through April 30th. If a household does qualify for LiHEAP, they're also qualifying for the Weatherization Assistance Program. And by law, if they qualify for those programs, then they are protected from having their utilities turned off throughout the winter months. So from November 1st to April 1st, they can rest assured knowing that they will have heat during the winter months. Bills continue to accrue, so we do everything we can to help them, get on an affordable payment plan. Financial literacy programs are offered through the community action agencies, and we just do everything we can to help them in that way lower their energy burden. And then one other thing the program does is we have a crisis component, and there are different things we can do to help households through that. One is repairing or replacing heating systems in owner-occupied homes. We can also assist with emergency delivery of propane if a tank is at 20% full or lower. We can help avert a disconnection if someone has a past due bill or a disconnect notice. We can help with that. Or if someone's already disconnected, we can help them get their utility reconnected. And then finally, we provide blankets if needed, electric space heaters, and in the summer, we can also assist with cooling needs, such as providing fans and portable air conditioners. So that's it in a nutshell.
Great.
And I'm Kevin Nordmeyer. I'm a practicing architect with BNIM in Des Moines. We have offices in Des Moines, Kansas City, and San Diego. And I'm a native Iowan. I grew up on a farm in northern Iowa and have been a practicing architect in Iowa for about 30 years now, and have always specialized in highly sustainable, energy efficient design in terms of various building types in my career. Taught at Iowa State for a little bit, my alma mater, and then in the late 2009 to 2011, I was director of the Iowa Energy Center at Iowa State University. And so I'm here today, though, because of some of the projects we're doing have been contracted to do with the Iowa Economic Development Authority. Since 2000 and I think it's 13, we've been doing sustainable design workshops to teach developers, communities, councils of government, and design teams that are implementing CDBG funds for low and moderate income housing projects, or regular CDBG projects that would be daycares and things like that in communities. We've been teaching those teams how to design highly efficient and construct highly efficient, affordable, and healthy environments for the people that will use those facilities, that will live in apartments and homes that are renovated, or upper story Main Street buildings and things like that. And as part of that, we've also been hired through another RFP process to conduct a comprehensive planning project for the towns of Hamburg and Pacific Junction in Western Iowa, to help those two communities envision a future of how to rebuild after the floods of 2019. So we're just starting a comprehensive planning project there, where we will also be educating and teaching through that other workshop process the communities there on how to rebuild for low and moderate income families, rebuild sustainably, efficiently, and to create environments that are highly productive and efficient, basically. And then lastly, a third reason I'm here is we've received a grant through the Iowa Energy Office to develop some model prototypical homes that are intended to be affordable and prototypical, that are net zero energy ready, so that developers across the state, home builders across the state, and particularly the developers that might receive some of these CDBG funds in Southwest Iowa over the next year or so, could implement some of these strategies in housing construction to create potentially net zero energy ready homes for people.
That's great. I definitely want to come back to that in our conversation here. But I wanted to start briefly, Shalla. So, Salvation Army serves a lot of at-risk Iowans with all the services you listed before, but one of them is food needs that they might have. Now, right after the derecho, the Salvation Army in Cedar Rapids was left without power, like pretty much the rest of the town. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about the energy challenge that your organization itself faced, and what needs you might have on that front.
So we, like everyone else, we lost power in the middle of the storm, and that first afternoon we were actually in the middle of feeding our free lunch. So we had our staff, we had our day camp children, we had clients in the basement with us that afternoon. When we emerged from the basement, first priority was to make sure that everybody was safe, everybody had a way to get home or to wherever they needed to go. We also checked the building and discovered that our gym, which is probably a third of our building, the roof had been ripped, the membrane had been ripped off the roof along with the air handlers, and we had water pouring into the gym, which also serves as our cafeteria. So there really wasn't anything we could do that first night. One of the things I like to just remind everybody is this disaster affected everybody in town. Nobody was not touched. So our staff, there are about 10 of us, we then tried to get home, and it took me 45 minutes to go what normally takes me 10 minutes. But my husband and I, who both work at the Salvation Army, we realized that we had to figure out how to get power to the building as soon as possible because we had people we needed to help. We knew this community needed help. We also didn't want to lose the amount of food that we had in our freezers. We have 2 commercial sized freezers and a walk-in cooler. So bright and early the next morning, about 6:30, we headed out, especially once we realized that all communications were down. Cell phones seemed to work for a little while after the storm, but then by the evening, everything was pretty much blacked out. And we headed to Altoffer and were able to get one of the last generators they had for a commercial sized building. We then drove over to an electrical company, Nelson, and said, hey, could you come and hook this up for us? Altoffer had to do a little work on the building or on their generator. And by about 4 in the afternoon on Tuesday, we had power to our building. So we were out of power for about 27 hours in total, which really, considering the situation, considering what everybody was dealing with, was rather quick. And our staff were all told to come in the next morning. We got sandwiches ready. We then were able to deploy 3 different mobile units. We were using our vans at the time to various areas in the city that had been hit the hardest, namely those apartment building areas that had been hit the hardest. And then we also served food in our parking lot. And we continued that process, and that process grew as the week went on. We had other Salvation Army Corps come in from Iowa City, from Pekin, Illinois. We had people coming down from Minnesota, what we call the Northern Division. We had a very large group that was going out into the Marion and Cedar Rapids area, feeding folks, talking with folks. It wasn't just about making sure they had food and water, but making sure that they had an ear to hear their story, to hear a shoulder to cry on if they needed it. People were just devastated by what had happened to us and to our community.
I wanted to just ask you, Shalla, kind of thinking about the needs that you have and the great service that you guys performed and can have the capacity to perform. Have you done some research into how much buying a generator would cost? And is that within the scope of most nonprofits?
We have started to research it. Our advisory board, it's one of the key things that we would like to add as a kind of permanent piece to our building, especially as a response to a disaster. The first round of research has come back astronomical, and no, most nonprofits, including ours, could not afford it. There might be some different routes we could go, but it's still going to be quite expensive. And we're not that big of a building, to be honest, but to make sure that we're able to run our kitchen and our freezers and our basic needs, you need a decent sized generator. And yes, this is something that we're going to look at in more depth, but we're going to have to start looking at sponsors or grants or a combination of both, so that, I mean, this could happen again. We could have a blizzard take out lines. There's lots of different reasons. And as you know, the Salvation Army tries to get out there as fast as we can to make sure that we're providing food and water. And we need to have most of the tools we can do to do that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. I wanted to ask you, Chris, it's now fall. We had a little bit colder today than we've had in the week or so. And, winter's coming to the state. Chris, you had said that for the maximum benefit one-time payment for LiHEAP is $460. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about who are the residents that LiHEAP is serving, and is this benefit over the course of the winter enough?
Sure. So the average benefit is $470. The maximum is around $700. Oh. So yeah. And a third of the population that we serve is either elderly or disabled. So it's quite a few. And as far as does the benefit, last through the winter? No, it doesn't. Like I mentioned, low-income households typically live in very inefficient homes. So the people we serve spend about 25% of their income on their utility bills, whereas other folks spend about 11% of their income on utilities. So it's a huge difference. And the less money you have to work with, the harder it is to afford those things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
No, Ashley, with Green Iowa AmeriCorps, I know that you're kind of working to help some of these, improve the energy efficiency with weatherization and other things. What are some successes you've had?
Yeah, so I think, overall, we've been able to build a pretty strong, awareness of our programming, which has been really helpful, and have been able to collaborate with our local community action agencies at times, our utility companies, to be able to get the word out, which I think sometimes is the most challenging part when you have a service that's available. It's really making sure that people are aware of it, know how to access it, and really kind of get you to their door. And I think the great thing is when we go in, there are people, and I think a lot of people in general, that are really unaware of the function of their own home. They don't know if they have a gas or electric water heater. They don't know if they would have a gas leak. They don't know if they have LED lights or incandescent lights. And so sometimes a lot of the biggest win is just education. There's certainly the piece of us going in and being able to make a significant difference. We do something called a blower door test with our audit, which assesses the air infiltration of a home. So if you have leaks around your windows or your doors or in your basement, that will show us exactly where those leaks are taking place, which really gives us a roadmap to be able to go into that whole household and then do air sealing in those specific places. And so we can then do a post test, is what we call it, and it can show us the reduction in air infiltration. So how much our services are actually reducing airflow and how much money that's going to be able to result just based on those improvements that we made. And I think the other big place is really efficiency measures. The great thing is that some of the pricing with LEDs and things like that has dropped pretty dramatically in the last couple of years. And really that's one of the most significant places when we're talking about easy, not necessarily a furnace replacement, but easy measures that people can do that can have a really big impact. And I know we've spoken too of just COVID, everyone is home so much more. People are spending so much more time in their homes with their heat on, with their lights on. And that's really playing a part in, the rise in utility bills. And so I think just us being able to educate people about good behavior change in their home to help reduce their bill, and also us being able to come in and do the direct service work that's going to make a difference. And so, we've seen some really significant reductions in air infiltration. We've seen people saving, over $100, a month on just the things that we've been able to improve. And I think the other thing that's really helpful is a big component of our program also does some safety checks. So making sure that you don't have a gas leak in your home, or you don't have CO issues in your home, which a lot of times if you're talking about elderly populations or low income households, as Christine said, sometimes the efficiency or the safety that's happening in those homes can really be a concern too. So to me, that's the other biggest place where we are seeing success, when we can identify safety concerns for people and make sure that they're getting the resources they need to not only live in an efficient house, but a safe house too.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kevin, I know you had mentioned you've been, hired by the state to kind of develop home designs that could be used by developers who are coming in maybe after floods or other disasters. Can you tell us what features these homes typically include and whether they would be in reach of low to middle income Iowans?
Mm-hmm. We're just starting this process, and so we don't have the designs done yet. But what we're starting with is a concept of balancing costs, and this is all new construction, so it's balancing costs versus the performance of the building. And something that Ashley mentioned there was the first strategy for any zero energy ready home is you have to design it sort of tight and compact first with passive strategies. So using the sun and minimizing heat gain and orienting the building right and things like that. So one of our strategies is looking at how would a prototypical home be modified slightly given its orientation in a new subdevelopment or in an infill lot. How could you tweak where windows are so that it's passively organized to help maximize energy usage in the building, utilizing the sun, for example, in the winter and not in the summer. So efficiency is always first. And then for any sort of cost analysis strategy, be it a home or a business or anything, it's the size of the project times the quality of materials times the time you build it in is the budget of the project. So really right sizing the footprint to try to maximize living space and bedroom spaces, have spaces that are used for multiple purposes, learning things from tiny houses, you know, and how to really maximize storage space and things like that. We're thinking about this first series of prototypes we're doing. We're thinking about slab on grade without basements, purely from a cost standpoint, but also from a standpoint of using that slab as a thermal storage for passive heating strategies and things like that, and creating a fortified room or a safe room or a closet for tornado prone areas and things like that. And then after efficiency and shaping the house, there's always the systems you put in it. So we're going to strategize different heating and cooling systems and determine which one ends up being most cost effective for the size of home and in our climate zone. And then LEDs are pretty much given today. So as Ashley mentioned, LEDs are a really great low energy strategy for any building type, but particularly homes. And then appliances are the last thing. How you heat the hot water, how you Energy Star appliances and things like that. So we're just in the process, but what we've seen as a problem that we're trying to help solve is that most people pick a plan out of a plan book that's been designed and it can be built in Arizona or Minnesota or Maine or Washington, right? And what we're trying to do is say, for this climate, what first of all are what's the right size of home for typical Iowa families, be it seniors or young families or empty nesters or whatever the demographic group is, and then looking at this notion of we can't I mean, if you place a typical home in 3 different orientations in the same development, each home's going to operate a little bit differently, just because their windows are oriented differently and so forth. So that's one of the first things we're starting to look at in terms of the analysis of these prototypes.
That's fascinating. I could totally see how that would make a big difference, just with design and the direction it's turned and where you have things situated.
Right.
A question that came up while Ashley was speaking, and I think this could relate to several of our panelists, what kind of language accessibility is provided by your groups for non-English speakers? And anyone can jump in.
I can start. So what we've tried to do is continue to develop a lot of our languages in Spanish. We also have some large Burmese populations here in our local Waterloo location, but I think it's an area that we can continue to improve on all the time. You know, I think that the reality is that those barriers are even more significant for non-English speakers. And so often even trying to translate our service work around energy efficiency can sound like a foreign language to people who speak English sometimes, right? Just trying to clarify what, kilowatt hours are, or some of those things. And so we're continuing to work to have some relationships where we're fortunate enough at the University of Northern Iowa where we can work with some students to do some translation if we're heading into a home where we know that it's a non-English speaker. We've partnered quite a bit with Embark, which is a refugee program that's also located here in Waterloo and in Des Moines. But I think we can always be doing more to create more access, more clarity, and just more diversity of the languages we have things in. But yeah, that's something we're always striving for. But we've tried to continue to utilize the resources that are already available in our communities to make sure that information is kind of getting through trusted sources too, which I say is probably the other most challenging thing, is making sure that we're partnering with people that are trusted members of those non-English speaking communities so that they know that this is a reliable, dependable, service that they can access.
Yeah, that's the same with LiHEAP. Yeah, we have translated the intake form and the appeals procedure and the bill inserts into 15 different languages. We partner with Embark and other organizations to have like a day specified that those folks can come in and apply for the program and have interpreters right there. We also provide a language link and, you know, partner with local organizations just as much as possible. So
we're also seeing the challenges of language barriers, and we're seeing, especially in the Cedar Rapids area, a shift from the need for Spanish-based languages into more African-based languages. With the refugee population continuing to grow, we're seeing a lot of French need because of the French background in some of the African countries, but we're also seeing Swahili, and it has been, even though I don't work personally with clients in certain events, I do interact with them, and it is challenging for both them and us. And so we're continually working with the other nonprofits in our community to increase our ability to interpret, increase our ability to help these folks understand. During the storm, one of the hardest hit areas was a apartment complex where a large number of African refugees were staying. Not only do they not understand what is happening, they didn't understand that they needed insurance. They don't understand how to read their utility bills sometimes. So we're trying to kind of open our casework up a little more and look into how we can help these folks. But as I said, it's a shift from 5 years ago, maybe, or 7, where Spanish was one of our strongest needs. We're now shifting into French and Swahili.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like kind of listening and kind of keeping your ears open to how your community might be changing too, and what new languages might be needed. Another question that came in, and this is from State Representative Chuck Eisenhart. He has a question for Green Iowa and LiHEAP. He says he represents the lowest income neighborhoods in Dubuque. Along with the county energy district, he'd like to sponsor a project that would involve thermal mapping of the homes in some of these neighborhoods to identify which buildings occupied by LiHEAP beneficiaries need more insulation. He wonders, you know, maybe whether you and I could help with that, or whether there might be some aid there.
Yeah, I can speak to it. So yeah, we have had an operational Green Iowa site. Dubuque's been one of our longest. We've been there since 2010, 11, and worked with the city and energy districts. And we actually were fortunate enough around that same time, around 2010, 11, to work with Cedar Falls Utilities on a similar thermal imaging mapping project that they did. They partnered with us. They partnered with geography and GIS at the university, and they did essentially a thermal flyover of Cedar Falls that did exactly what you're talking about. It basically used that as a thermal map to identify where some increased insulation could be seen from an aerial view. And so our team was useful in going out and doing mapping points, and then once they've identified structures that could use some additional insulation or just use some additional benefits, then we would follow up with those households to be able to offer kind of more strategic services for audits and weatherization. So we've certainly helped with the past. It was a huge success for Cedar Falls Utilities, but that would be a great other place to start as far as a local Iowa utility that has done this work and seen success from it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I know in weatherization, I know they've looked at things like that, and we would love to partner, see what we could do to find those homes in weatherization for the state office or the program. We do have a priority list, so we have about 80,000 households that are approved every year. And we only have enough funding to weatherize about 1,000 of those. So we do have to prioritize on greatest energy usage. And then we also target the vulnerable population. So those that have elderly or disabled or children under the age of 6 in their homes too. So yeah. But I wanted to. No, go ahead.
No, I just said I wanted to turn a little bit to a problem that I think kind of overshadows a lot of these different issues, and that's the lack of affordable housing, in almost probably all of the state. And I know that the derecho has made it even worse. I wanted to just open it up to all the panelists, whether you could speak to how this shortage, maybe makes it even more so landlords and home builders may not be forced to have energy efficiency at top of mind. Like, what can be done on this front?
One issue that's been a problem in the past has been for building owners that have large apartment complexes or even smaller apartment complexes. If they are passing those utilities on to the or that the renter is paying for those utilities on their own, there's no incentive for the construction of that apartment building to be anything beyond what would just be required to meet the code. And then the code, the whole other issue is the building or the energy efficiency code really isn't enforced throughout the state. So many buildings today really aren't performing to what they should be just to even meet code. So then in a rental situation, if the renter is paying for their utilities, then there's no, while they can control the thermostat and would care how that affects their utility bill, the building may not be as efficient as it could be. So one thing I know that the city of Des Moines has started to do, I assume other communities are doing this too, for any projects that the city is investing in, either with TIF money or with whatever land arrangements and so forth for developers, they're starting to require that they have a certain percentage beyond code for efficiency measures. And so for economic development as well, the green streets criteria that I talked about, any project that they are investing CDBG money in for low to moderate income properties and so forth, those have to show at least a 10% improvement beyond the current code. And then they keep updating that. So as the codes get more efficient, they're requiring to go beyond code, I guess is the point. So the people that are providing money are those that can start driving that change, I believe.
And I think you make a good point that there are so many landlords that aren't maintaining their homes because it's not being enforced. And it would be nice if they would understand that if a person's utility bills went down, then they might be able to pay their rent on time, things like that. So yeah, if we could I think enforcement is huge, and just getting the landlords to understand how energy efficiency plays into whether or not they get paid rent on time.
That's a really good point. I'm kind of taking notes here because as a reporter, I'm like, maybe there's some story ideas here. But what sort of, it sounds like on a couple of fronts, that maybe we need to be talking with some of these building inspectors about why these codes aren't being enforced. But is there legislation that's needed that might require builders or landlords to do more? I know we have at least one elected official on the session here today. So what are some ideas there?
Well, let me modify my comment. It's not that every community in Iowa isn't enforcing the energy code. It's just the energy code is the one that's applied statewide, but most building officials, and rightly so, are looking out for the life safety aspects of the code, of the building codes, which they obviously have to be and need to be. And so the state of Iowa, the Department of Public Safety, for several years, were doing some training sessions for building code inspectors on energy efficiency measures. So I don't think they're doing that anymore right now, but through a period of years, previous years, there are a certain number of inspectors out there that likely are looking for things like that. But there's not every house is going through blower door assessments, as Ashley mentioned. Things like that is the point. So even though we can design buildings to meet code, there's so many things that can happen in construction that an inspector isn't even going to catch. And so there's just a quality control issue too that needs to happen. And that's why economic development, for example, has us out teaching people for their projects to try to maximize the implementation of all and the conformance of all these strategies in their projects, for example.
I think continuing to incentivize, the ability to do some efficiency improvements, whether that's for residents or landlords, is also important. I know we've had the opportunity in the past to work with landlords who have, they kind of felt like it was a no-brainer to switch out their systems or to go to all LEDs when they saw some pretty significant kickbacks as it relates to rebates. So I think those have always been an incentive that has been pretty effective from what we've seen. I know those are sometimes hard to figure out exactly how it can be, cost effective too. But I think continuing, as Kevin has said, to make sure that we're building with things in mind from the very beginning, and then doing what we can to hold people accountable to those standards. But also making sure, the reality is that landlord-tenant relationship is challenging for everyone right now. It's challenging for tenants to be able to pay their rent in these times. It's been challenging for people who own rental properties if they're not able to see income coming in from their tenants because they've been laid off work or whatever. So I think the reality is that a lot of landlords, they're Iowans too, trying to figure out the best way that they can kind of manage properties. And so being able to figure out a good, mutually beneficial relationship between landlords and tenants, I think, should be at the top of people's minds when we're thinking about this and ways we can expand affordable housing that's also safe and also is an economic investment for a landlord too.
Another suggestion from Representative Eisenhart. He's given me a lot of comments here, so if I don't, and he's just so on point with them. But he said a proposal that's met with some resistance in the legislature is a requirement that landlords provide energy disclosure information to prospective renters before leasing. Does anyone on the call think that's a good idea? Would that be helpful?
I definitely think it'd be helpful. I sat on an energy efficiency commission for the state back in 2008 to 2010. And I think that was one idea we had in that report, or at least we talked about that idea. And we also talked about one where buildings should be brought up to the energy code when they're sold. So as part of the title transfer process and so forth, you'd be required to bring that building up to the energy code if you sell it. Was another idea we had in that report that I don't believe anything has been done with that for the last decade either.
We've worked here in Waterloo and haven't had a ton of traction necessarily, but worked with the Black Hawk County Landlords Association to try and figure out if there could be some sort of like energy efficiency or green rating scale for a resident, so that if we could say just working with Green Iowa to go in and if you have had an energy audit done, you've had that weatherized, you kind of made X, Y, and Z improvements, like that would give you a three green leaf rating or 4, right? And so, and then thinking about whether a possibility to have some sort of community map to say, like, if you're looking at rental properties in Black Hawk County, you could look easily at these properties and know this is a 1-star, this is a 3-star, this person hasn't even participated. And so not necessarily something where people are mandated to participate, but it gives education to the people who are looking at potential rentals to know, like Christina has said, a lot of times people's utilities are this surprising and significant expense, that's going to match their rent. And if you don't know that going in, that can be kind of catastrophic, that you've signed a 12-month lease in a house you can't afford, So something like that is something at least we've been throwing around here to figure out how we can, just provide more education and make that easy for landlords so that people can know more, and that it can also not be a huge burden on the landlords themselves.
I think it could be a marketing advantage for developers to market the fact that, hey, that in my apartment building, you're going to have X% less utilities than a typical apartment building in town, or things like that. And a fellow that has done this is the Sun Prairie Apartments. He's won awards over the years out in West Des Moines, and I know he's he's received state funding before to do some demonstrations and to teach and preach about it. So if people want to know more about that, Keith Denner is his name in West Des Moines, and he's always trying to teach developers of apartment buildings how to really build and renovate to high energy efficiency standards, and then make it much more affordable to the tenants, and actually then use that as a business model to rent more units and so forth. And so he claims that it works for him, and it should work for anybody.
Yeah, I get excited when I hear about ideas like that, because I think if only we could replicate that, all over the place. Several panelists have spoken just about the education challenges, whether it comes to even just asking or researching what the utility bills are before you buy a place, or, before you rent a place, or, knowing what programs are out there. What sort of education efforts would the panelists like to see to help people understand utility bills or other aspects of their energy costs?
I think it would be great if there can be just a little more education by the utility companies to everybody. I mean, myself included, understanding how the bill works, how a meter is read, how a budget plan is available. Sometimes people will get a bill, open it, and look at it and go, oh, I can't pay that. I've got to pay the babysitter this month, and we've used all this heat. They don't even realize there's a budget plan. So making sure, and sometimes people will say, well, we do make sure. Well, sometimes you got to really put it right in front of people's faces so that they can see, yes, there's a budget plan. Or, yes, we need to show you different options that Ashley maybe can help you with to make sure that you're not letting heat seep out the windows and all of those different things. And I think, people have to meet halfway. The utility companies can't just do it all. People have to be willing to be open to learning, and sometimes it's not just open to learning, it's being afraid of what you don't know, and that fear of, oh, there's that bill, I'm going to put it back in the box and hopefully it'll just go away. Everybody has done that, and so making it so hopefully that people can go, okay, I need some help with this. And I have always said that the people who call in to us at the Salvation Army and ask for help are some of the most courageous people in my book, because it takes everything you've got to dial that number and say, hey, I'm in trouble. I don't understand this. What can you do to help me? Because we don't like to admit that we're in trouble. So organizations like ourselves, like I mentioned, we have our Pathway of Hope program, is another way that we can help people learn, especially those folks who are new to our country or even new to the Midwest and don't understand some of the things that we do differently here versus I lived in Florida for a few years. I didn't realize that the air conditioner and the furnace were in the same box. I have a air conditioner and then I have a furnace different here. So, they, even in different parts of this country, things are different. So helping people feel comfortable learning and making it easy to learn.
Another thing, the CEEE folks, where Ashley works at UNI, for years they've been doing a lot of K-12 education work and things like that, and education work in schools. And I think when I was at the Energy Center, we funded a lot of those programs, and I think teaching little kids in school is a really good strategy, because then they take that home and help with their parents as well. And so so that's one strategy as well that I think continues on today.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of Shalla, thanks. One thing that utilities can do is really talk about the fact that there are payment plans that someone can enter into, and to let people know that they aren't obligated to accept the first payment plan, that the utility says. Like, so many people have maybe $150, $200 or more a month just on their regular bill. And then they also have an arrearage that could be another $200-300 a month. So you're looking at a $400 to $500 a month bill. And people don't feel comfortable saying, I really can't afford that. Sometimes they don't realize they can say, there's no way I can afford that. And sometimes the utilities, I mean, for the most part, they're good at talking with customers, but some of them aren't. Some of them only offer a payment plan to a household that has been good at paying their bills. Well, that doesn't help someone who has a high arrearage or just simply can't pay their monthly bill because of the housing stock they live in. So I think it's really important that people feel empowered to say, this is what I can afford. And, you know, I'd love for you to give me a chance to do this.
The other thing I was going to add is just our own education about resources in our community, I think are really important. So, you know, if someone calls me at Green Iowa, you know, desperate for things that need to get done, it's always nice to be able to say, I can refer them to LiHEAP, or I can refer them to the Salvation Army, or I can refer them to HACAP, or I can refer them to these different, or Matthew 25 agencies that are going to be able to have kind of a comprehensive approach to be able to help this person. Because I know we get so many calls where people are desperate. People are so desperate to just find somebody that can help them. And it may not be that I am the solution. Like, I can't repair your roof, right? I can't pay your utility bill. But if I had a network of resources that I was familiar with, I can then give people an opportunity to pursue those. And we've all been there where we're trying to like just get to what we need. And it's exhausting to have to keep calling this person or that person, or trying to Google what could possibly be something that is helping us. And so for people on the call, especially if you're in, you know, other organizations or within your city government or whatever, like having a really strong knowledge base of the resources in your community, I think for our own education is important, so that we can be better advocates to connect people to the things that can help them more comprehensively. Like, yeah, I can come and audit and weatherize your house, but if you have past bill dues, like I'm going to send you over to Christina and LiHEAP or to the Salvation Army, because that's going to also provide you with some relief. And if I'm not aware of those services, that's a real missed opportunity for me to make a bigger impact than I can just on my own as my own organization.
Now, one of the things that you said when we talked previously, Ashley, that's kind of stuck with me this week is that sometimes it's probably easy to feel like it's a little bit like a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. I think that's what, similar to the analogy you made, just that, you know, LED lights and things like that are great, and they're maybe low-hanging fruit and can help, but there's just these big issues with, you know, bigger issues too. And we've been talking about some of that. But, you know, kind of express when you're feeling that way, what's a way that how do you kind of get yourself out of that and say, well, step by step, here's one thing we're doing today.
Right. Yeah. Band-Aid on a gunshot wound is sometimes how it feels when you're going into like try and make it a mobile home energy efficient, right? Sometimes it just feels like, man, are we really making a difference here? And I think anyone who works in service work, whether it's environment or economics or education, everyone has sometimes those moments where you're kind of questioning your impact. But I think the reality is that every little bit helps, right? And we do have that, you know, effect of buildup. And I think that even us showing up, even us being there, I think sometimes just, you know, having a conversation or having our AmeriCorps members there doing minimal things at times, LEDs, I think just the hope that is sometimes instilled when you're able to go and be able to see people there caring for another person, caring for a household, to me, that's always inspiring. I think the other big thing for me for our AmeriCorps program, we last year had around 120 AmeriCorps members go through our program. And these are typically people from the state of Iowa, all over the country, who really come to Iowa for a year or a summer, and they're passionate about making a difference in their community, you know, and they're kind of adopting these communities as their own and going into circumstances they've never been in before, and are passionate about making a difference. And so for me, sometimes that is also the biggest thing to kind of get us through, is that we're also engaging this next generation of people that are going to continue to do important work and care about their community and be engaged citizens. And even just sitting on a panel like this where we can learn more about all the important work that people are doing, and makes you kind of feel not alone in kind of your efforts to try and improve the environment or energy efficiency or serve vulnerable populations. So even things like this are inspiring, and having people be part of conversations like this today are great.
Now, piggybacking on that, just let's finish up the hour, maybe with Shalla, Chris, and Kevin sharing, in your work, has there been a bright spot recently, something that you could share that has kept you going?
Actually, yes, it's not necessarily energy based, but we see so many people come through our doors, and sometimes we see the same people, and we see what we call a poverty rut, a generational poverty rut. And people learn by example, and we see the next generation in our doors needing help with their utilities. We had a gentleman who ended up on the streets, and he participated in our meal program and became one that we knew, and we all kind of took to heart. And last Christmas, we hired him as a bell ringer. We do have some bell ringers that we pay, and we gave him a chance. And his first paycheck, he went and cleaned himself up. He got a haircut. He trimmed his beard. He is now working a full-time job and is moving into his own apartment. And those are the success stories that we see, and we see it in a lot of different families. But that's been the one right now that's really kept us going.
That's a good one. Chris, Kevin?
Yeah, so it made me think about a call that we had this week. And I actually spoke with this woman, and she was recently diagnosed with COVID. And she was coughing and just telling me how bad she felt, that she'd never felt this bad before. But she said, I've been without work for 2 months, because I'm on day 40 something. And she said, I have 2 kids and they go to school, but they're going remotely, and I can't afford my internet. I can't afford my utilities. And so, we connected her with community action, and, like you were saying, Ashley, just connected her with services from different programs. We often refer to Salvation Army as well. And, those are the things that if one thing can go right for somebody, it makes a world of a difference. It just lessens their burden and gives them that hope that they so desperately need.
And for me, I'm glad I went last because it gave me time to think about a response. But I think I've been, I mentioned that for my whole career, I've been involved in sustainable design. And right now, I think with what's happening in the world today, the timing of things, for me has just been really unique. I've been working on the Harkin Institute at Drake University. So that is for Senator Tom Harkin, for his institute that was created there after he retired. And so that building we've designed to be universally designed and broadly inclusive and equitable and sort of gracious for anyone, no matter of your ability or disability. Whether it's autism or physical disability or partial blindness or deafness, things like that. And so I've started to expand my notion of what sustainability is to really be a notion of really empathetic design process that not only is considering energy efficiency that's going to reduce carbon in the atmosphere, that's going to help save the planet and change the climate in a positive way, but also thinking about all of these design decisions on a project and how it eventually affects the people, obviously the people that are using all of these buildings, and to be broadly inclusive and equitable. So that project has really been a good one to really explore a lot of these ideas and to think about all these things. It's been pretty rewarding.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. Thanks to all four of you for what you do in our state. It's a better place because of the hard work you're putting into it. And thank you for your insights here today as our final session of the day for Iowa Ideas. So the energy and environment track will be back tomorrow morning at 8:30 in the morning with a panel on reforestation. I'm going to be moderating that as well, and that should be a good one. So again, thanks to the panelists and thanks to everyone else, and I hope you all have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.